The rich socialites chilling in their family luxury resort was a sight to behold. Grayson Andrews, the heir of the giant Andrews Corporation, who was just back from his Europe tour, and his sister Veronica was the notorious I want it, I get it girl. Ahem, this orange is oversweet. But, miss, this is fresh orange with no added sugar. Whatever, add some salt or anything, immediately. And bring me a sandwich with the beluga caviar here too.
Yes, miss. You've become some grumpy old lady recently, Ronnie.
Right at that moment, their dad hurriedly walked in, looking urgent.
Kids, I have something serious to tell you. Do you remember our resort in Vietnam that got backlash last month? Is this the case where people were blaming us for harming the environment? It's just some employee's reckless act, and we already cleared it out, right, Dad? That's right. But I've just got the report that the inspectors got involved and the resort's suffering a great loss. I couldn't see it keep sliding like that. So, I've been thinking of sending you to Vietnam to take care of this. Dad, you can count on me!
Vietnam, isn't it? That's where an idea came to Veronica. Dad, let me go with Grayson. I could be helpful. Her dad was considering it for a while and then agreed. Oh, Vietnam. It's been a hot minute. Of course, I have my own reason to be here again. And this is my reason. It all started back 4 years ago when Veronica's family gathered at Nam Family's resort on Lunar New Year, Tet holiday.
Wow, my friend, see what you're building.
You're right. I bet everyone would love this. Honey, this resort is surely profitable with this design and location. If only we could own one like this. Meanwhile, 14-year-old Veronica was totally mesmerized by someone else. Right at the moment her eyes caught the sight of Nam, Veronica was sure she met the one. Oh my, is this what people call love at first sight?
Look at you. The little kid now grew up into a pretty girl, huh? Here's your lucky money.
Instead of lucky money, could you please give me your lucky son? Everyone burst into laughter at her cheekiness, including Nam.
I heard Nam is an excellent student at school. We can't waste talent, right? So, I think I'll offer him a scholarship in America. What do you say?
A scholarship in the USA? Surely it's a good opportunity for me. He turned to see his parents' reaction, and they all nodded encouragingly.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I'd do my best to pay back your kindness.
But he definitely wasn't the one who enjoyed this the most, as our Veronica's heart was singing with joy, too. So that summer, Nam flew to America with all of the eagerness and excitement about the land of dream. He'd be staying with Mr. Andrews' family for the time being, and enrolled in the same school as Veronica and Grayson. And within the first week at the new school, he already established himself as a genius. It didn't take long for him to top in every single subject, and teachers were satisfied as he was also active in school's activities.
Son, I'm so proud of you.
Cozy as it seemed, the laughter in a warm family dinner didn't shine on the host's son, Grayson.
I'd never heard the proud word from Dad before. Being the heir is not easy, but I tried my best. Why was he always the one outstanding?
After the dinner, when others left, Mrs. Andrews approached Nam. Don't think my husband gave you some compliments that you believe you're above anyone. Remember, you're just a parasite on my husband's kindness. So Mrs. Andrews didn't like me here. I'd better be careful. From a corner, Veronica was hearing what her mom said to Nam. Mom's always been hard like that. It's all right, Nam. Be strong. You have me here. And she made sure she'd be anywhere Nam was, and no girls could come near him. Nam, be my boyfriend. Will you?
Ronnie, don't make a scene here.
Aw, did he just call me Ronnie? Everyone, attention! Nam is mine. Don't you dare bother my man. To seal up even more, she stuck a bunch of stickers on his clothes and bag.
Huh, nice tattoo, bro.
It's nonsense. You like it? Then here. Then when Grayson had ran far, he looked down on his hand holding a sticker. Stupid girl. She couldn't design a better one? You think it's the end of How to Get Nam's Heart plan? Then you underestimate this girl. Nam, I got sunstroke. I'm too weak to walk myself. Take me home. Jeez. Seemed like she'd never run out of tactics, huh?
Wow, tending to your bae this much.
Nam Simplord. The buzzing from the others did bother him, but he didn't want to make a mess as he's indebted to Veronica's family's kindness. And deep down, he found her annoyance kinda cute. Aw, so sweet, man. Maybe he likes me too. And then Grayson ran towards them and cheerfully gave them the good news.
Hey, Dad just won a big contract, and we will dine in Gordon Ramsay's restaurant tonight, guys.
Yay! Are you sure you're tired? Ouch! Oh, my head hurts so bad.
Nam, I think I'm gonna faint. Carry me, too.
You wish! I'm gonna be up here forever. Then 3 of them walked side by side, happily chatting, and the schoolyard seemed to be lit up by their cheerful laughter. Everything went smooth like that. Then one day, Veronica woke up to see Nam was packing all his stuff. "What are you doing?" "I'm going back to Vietnam." "Why? Has anything happened? Please don't go." "Get off me!" Then he coldly walked straight out of her house with no more words. Veronica crouched in sadness. Worse still, no matter how hard she tried to contact him, still no replies from Nam. The only news she could update was his family's resort was plunged into crisis. And with a goodwill, Veronica's dad offered to buy the resort with an enormous sum to help them restart their business anew. And for the past 4 years, her heart still wanted no one but Nam, and she'd been waiting desperately for this reunion.
Yo, long time, right, bro?
"Hello, stranger." "It actually feels good to see them too. If only that hadn't happened. The 3 of us might still be a perfect trio now." Nam couldn't forget the day when the hurtful truth was revealed. It's you who schemed against our resort? But why?"
"Huh, you should ask why your father had that impeccable resort that makes me want it to be mine." "Thanks anyway."
I'm gonna tell Mr. Andrews."
"Suit yourself. But remember, 2 families are working together on a project. Let's see. If we withdraw, who knows? Your family will go bankrupt.
Do you really want that?
Huh?"
Nam felt rage boiling up his body, but so did the powerless feeling. Right at that moment, he saw Veronica went home and immediately clanged to her mom. "Mom, there's a new spa downtown. Does it speak mother-daughter time to you?"
"Of course, hon. Anything you want."
"They're all the same. Spoiled rich socialites who think they're above everyone." And right in that minute, he realized that he couldn't be here any longer. "Xin chào, Nam. How you doing? Do you miss me?" But Nam just coldly turned to the other direction.
"Seems like someone just got ignored."
"And seems like someone wants a death note." "That's fine. He's just being shy. I'd be staying in Vietnam for a while and definitely make him my boyfriend." "Nam, you can't run away from me this time." But Nam was such a workaholic, and with Veronica's presence, he's stuck in the office even later. At this rate, how am I supposed to seduce him? There is the only way. After that incident, Nam's family managed to build a small hotel, but attracted a great influx of tourists. That afternoon, Veronica came there, then barged into the office room. "Oh, hi! Hello. Hi. Dad told me to go here and learn some business, but Grayson doesn't give me anything. Please let me help you here." "What do you want now?" Nam just wanted some peace away from Veronica, but things didn't go that way easily.
"Come on, son. Do you remember when our family had a hard time? Veronica's family was willing to help us."
"Help our butt, Dad. If only you knew."
"Okay, but don't make a mess here."
The day after, Veronica had the first working day at Nam's family's hotel. "Mangosteen? We don't have this in America. Hey, you, bring me more. Hey guys, can you bring the sunshade here? I'm not wanting to be a burnt squid."
"Didn't you tell me you wanted to learn? Get off your butt."
Then Nam gave her loads of errands that she hardly had time to breathe. "Geez, I don't need to lift a finger at home, and now I'm folding blankets? The world is getting crazy." Then she shook off the bedsheet, but somehow the towel covered her head like the one in a ghost story film. "Woo! Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm sexy and I know it." Little did she know, there was someone who couldn't hide his smile watching her fooling herself. "She hasn't changed much."
"Hey, what you doing? Do it properly."
Later, Veronica was dragging her aching body back to her family's resort after her first working day. "Oh, I can't feel my hand anymore, and my feet hurt running around."
"Stop whining, Ronnie. It's nothing to what I've done today. Planning the strategies, promoting the services, blah, blah, blah."
Grayson turned around to see his sister already sleeping like a log. He gently put the blanket on her when he received a phone call from Mom.
"Hi, Mom. I'm doing just fine. No need to worry."
"Hey, I heard Nam's family's hotel is doing good, right? But right at the time our resort suffered? Coincidence can't explain this properly. Grayson, I'm sure he planned to get this revenge for the past thing."
"I don't think he's that much." "Anyway, Mom, you still hate him after those years?"
"I hate your dad always comparing you with him. This low class will never be on the same level with my son, right?" What Mom said didn't stay still in Grayson.
"It's true that Dad always regarded him more than me. Even when he's gone back to Vietnam, Dad still talked about Nam being this, Nam being that."
Next morning, Veronica got up and freaked out that she'd overslept for more than 2 hours. When coming to the hotel, she received a glaring look from Nam and a long list of errands that seemed not to end. "Gosh, I have to do this for how long?"
"Finish it, and we're going out for lunch."
Hearing that, Veronica diligently cleaned every corner of the hotel, making sure no single speck of dust left. Yay! Let's go for lunch! Huh? But why you're here as well? Happy being the third wheel? Then they went to a local store selling chicken rice, which was definitely out of Veronica's expectation. What the heck? Eating on the street? Nom, I don't like this place. I'm sweating like a dog already. Go to some restaurant and treat me with beefsteak. If you don't like it, then don't eat.
No worries, I'm gonna take care of her plate.
Come on. Okay, but you have to feed me. Feeling others' eyes on him, Nom had no other choice but to act along. At the first spoon, Ronnie didn't expect the taste explosion of the soft and tender chicken, as well as the gravy and rice. She immediately dug in the plate and finished in seconds. Slow down! No one takes your food. Then he gently wiped out the rice on her cheek, making her heart skip a beat. Later, Veronica and Nom took a stroll around Han River. You ask about Grayson? Veronica successfully cut the tail and made him stay still in a coffee shop. Ow! Vietnam summer is definitely like a giant oven. Aha! How about the classic move? Then Veronica wobbled like a jellyfish, aiming to fall into Nom's arms, but he suddenly walked away, leaving her landing face right on the ground. She scrambled up to see he was already chewing the fat with some random girl over there. Veronica immediately stormed in like a crazy bull towards the girl. Hey, who are you? I'm Nom's girlfriend. You better stay away from him, or else.
Sorry. See you next time. Then Nom hastily dragged her away. What are you doing? She's not the one you could mess around. She's my biggest partner.
Is that so? I'm sorry.
You, go back to work. Right now.
Then Nom caught up with Grayson at a coffee shop by the river.
My sister is a little annoying, right? As her brother, I do apologize to you. She's fine for the most part, but sometimes... Yeah, you know. I don't know what to do with her. There's always an answer for everything, bro.
The next day, Veronica came to Nom and saw him about to go somewhere, and as usual, she insisted going along with him.
Enough! Stop goofing around!
But I like you! You know that! Right at that moment, a girl walked over to them. Babe! Immediately, Nom turned around and pulled her in his arms.
Here you are!
Then he kissed her on the lips, and Ronnie was frozen in her spot.
Hi again, it's me, Amanda. In the first part of my story, my mom went to prison, and I ended up in an orphanage. 2 families attempted to adopt me, but both failed miserably. And then third time lucky, I met James. He adopted me, and we hit it off immediately. But then I started to develop inappropriate feelings for him. Everything was going great until Rosa, the new neighbor, turned up and started flirting with him. Now I'm jealous, and I need to find a way to tell James how I feel. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to my best friend Juana's house. She'd been my best friend ever since I'd ended up in the orphanage, and now she lived with her adoptive parents just 2 streets from my house. I told Juana how I was feeling about James, and how I thought maybe he felt the same about me, but then I explained how Rosa was getting in between us now. She was so supportive, and said I should tell him soon before anything happened between him and Rosa. I had been so nervous about telling him, but after she encouraged me, I suddenly had the courage. That weekend, we were going to the park together, and I was going to tell him then. I ended up staying quite late at Juana's house. We had dinner together and even drank some wine. By the time I got home, I was feeling a little tipsy. I was excited to see James, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I thought maybe he was working late, so I went to my room to lie down. As I went to close my curtains, I saw something outside. It was James, and he wasn't alone. He was with Rosa. I kept watching them, and suddenly, Rosa got really close to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. I felt like I was going to explode with jealousy. Did James like her? I had to do something. I knew I wasn't thinking straight because I was kind of drunk, but I couldn't just stand there and watch that woman steal him away from me. I saw him heading towards our house, so I stumbled down the stairs and ran to the front door. He opened the door, and I was ready. I rushed to grab him and started kissing him like mad. At first, he just froze. He didn't kiss me back. Then suddenly, he pushed me away and started shouting at me.
Amanda, what do you think you're doing? I'm your adoptive dad,
he said. I couldn't believe he was saying this. I said to him, but Dad, James, I thought you felt the same way. You've been so nice to me. I just like you so much. In fact, I think I'm in love with you, and I know you feel the same. James looked like his eyes were going to pop out of his head. He started walking away from me and said,
No, stop this. You've got it all wrong. I love you like a father loves his daughter.
I didn't believe him, though. I ran straight over to him and started kissing him harder. Then I ran my hands down his shirt and tried to undo some of his buttons. But then I felt a strong slap on my cheek that made me so dizzy, I almost fell down. I looked at James in shock. Had he really just hit me? He looked shocked too, and immediately apologized and said he was sorry. He reached out to touch my cheek, where his hand had left a massive red mark, but I moved away from him. He wasn't the kind of man to do this kind of thing. This was all because of Rosa. I knew it. I burst into tears and ran out of the house. I didn't even know where I was going. I just kept walking, and subconsciously, my feet led me to the orphanage. I went inside, even though it was late, and the woman working there came running up to me to check if I was okay. I burst into tears as soon as I saw them, and just stood there letting them hug me. They asked me if something bad had happened, but I couldn't even talk. I just cried and cried. That night, I slept at the orphanage and thought about everything that had happened since leaving there. I felt so awkward about what I'd done. Maybe it had been wrong to kiss James like that? The next morning, I woke up and said goodbye to the women at the orphanage. I decided it was time to head home and apologize for what I'd done the night before. But when I got home, the house was empty. In the living room, I found a note from James next to a photo of my mom and me. I could not believe what I was reading. James wrote,
Amanda, there's something I need to tell you. I knew your mom. In fact, we used to date. I didn't know she was your mom until I found this photo of you and her in your desk drawer. I met her when we were 17, and we quickly fell in love. I was the typical goody two-shoes kind of student, and your mom was the naughty rebel. But they say opposites attract, right? We had a passionate love affair. Then one day, your mom told me that she was pregnant. I'm sorry to admit this, but I freaked out. I asked her to get an abortion, but she refused. So I left her and went to study abroad. I've regretted it ever since. And when I got back from overseas, I tried to contact her, but I couldn't. So then I tried to forget about her, and got married and started a new life.
Then I read on, and it was even more shocking. It said,
From the moment I saw you, you seemed familiar, and now I know it's because you really are my long-lost daughter. I need some space now, though, because what happened yesterday was really awkward, and I need to gather my thoughts. Please wait for me, though. I promise I'll be back soon.
I was so stunned. Is this what I had been feeling? A special bond because he was actually my dad? Oh my God! I felt so embarrassed. I'd completely misunderstood my feelings. I sat there trying to process everything I'd just read when suddenly the phone rang. It was the woman from the orphanage, and they said my mom had come to get me. What? This was too much. In one day, my whole life had been flipped upside down. I ran back to the orphanage, but my mom had already left. I couldn't believe it. Luckily, she'd left a phone number, and I called her straight away asking her to meet me at a nearby coffee shop. After so many years, my mom had changed a lot. She was so much thinner, and her face looked more gentle. We ran towards each other, and both just started hugging and crying. I was speechless. I didn't realize how much I'd missed her until we were standing there holding each other. After about 5 minutes of hugging nonstop, I remembered there was something I wanted to ask her. I showed her a photo of James, and my mom was surprised to see this. I asked her if this was my dad, and my mom looked shocked. Then she just shook her head and asked me to sit down so she could tell me their love story. She said that they'd been deeply in love, but that James was planning to go study abroad for 3 years, She didn't want him to go, so she lied about being pregnant so that he would stay. But the plan backfired, and he still went abroad. My mom was so upset that the day he left, she went to a bar and got really drunk and ended up spending the night with a stranger. She can't really remember anything from that night, except the fact that the stranger is obviously my dad, and she has no idea who he is. Wow, this day just keeps getting crazier. I won't lie, I was relieved to hear James wasn't my real dad, especially after the kiss I'd forced on him. But now, after hearing my mom speak about how much she loved James, I realized something. They still liked each other. Maybe this was why all this had happened, so that I could bring them back together. I asked my mom to come back to the house with me, and then I offered to help her find an apartment. She was nervous to be in James's house, and as soon as she was inside and saw the photos of him and his family, she started crying. But I told her about the accident, and she was so shocked. Then she saw my room and started crying again and apologized for being such a bad mom to me in the past, and that it was all because she felt like her life had ended when James had left her. As she said that, we heard footsteps behind us, and I realized James was home. The moment he saw my mom, he just froze. And then they ran into each other's arms, and it was the sweetest thing I've ever seen. I left them to catch up and went to sit outside in the garden. At least now, I didn't need to worry about Rosa, and I guess I had everything I'd ever wanted. My mom was back, and she was like a new woman, and now I had a dad too. I finally had the family I'd always dreamed about.
Hey guys, Ellie here, again. I'm going to share with you the final part of my story, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. In part 2 of my story, my revenge plan really got underway. Brian went to New York to work for 3 months, and I managed to seduce Clark. Now we're dating, and I almost have all the info I need to make Sasha's company crash. But after an amazing day out with Clark, I came home, and you will not believe what was waiting for me. Brian was there. He was sitting in my living room, and he looked so angry. He'd flown home that afternoon and couldn't wait to spend that weekend with me. But when he arrived at my house, to surprise me, I wasn't there. He was about to call me to ask where I was when he received a photo from his friend. It was of me and Clark. Turns out his friend had seen us sharing a picnic by the Golden Gate Bridge and had sneakily taken a photo of us kissing each other and sent it to Brian. And he was mad. He started shouting at me, saying, "How could you cheat on me like this?" He looked heartbroken, and all I could do was cry. I couldn't even explain myself because the truth was much worse. If he knew it was just to hurt his mom, he'd never forgive me. In the end, he stormed out, leaving me there crying. But I had to be strong. I had to focus on my revenge. I didn't have time to sit and cry over Brian. For now, I'd have to put him to the side and try not to think about him. When Monday rolled around, I was exhausted. I'd barely slept the whole weekend and couldn't bear going to work. But I had no choice. The day dragged by, and by the time 5 p.m. rolled around, I waited until everyone left, and then I went to Clark's office. I gave him a hug, and he started massaging my neck and said, "Baby, you look so tired. What's up?" I replied saying, "No, I'm good. In fact, I'm much better now that I've seen you. Although I wouldn't say no to a cup of coffee." Of course, Clark happily went and made me one, and as soon as he was out of the room, I ran to his desk and started rummaging around looking for the documents. But I couldn't find them anywhere. Had he put them in a drawer? I quickly checked, but while I was doing that, Clark walked back into the room. "Ellie, what are you doing?" I got the fright of my life and stood up saying, nothing, just helping you tidy up your desk. It's such a mess." At that moment, my phone suddenly beeped. I went to grab it, but Clark got to it first. Oh no. Suddenly his face changed as he read my text. Then he said, "What's going on, Ellie? You better explain yourself quick." He handed me my phone back, and I couldn't believe it. It was my old colleague, Amy, asking if I'd got the last document yet to show how the app was put together. I felt so sick, and I knew I couldn't lie anymore. I looked back up at Clark, and in tears I told him everything. "Clark, I know you're probably going to hate me after I tell you this, and I don't blame you, but please just hear me out. Sasha is a nasty woman. She was actually my dad's mistress when I was a kid, and she tore apart my family. I'm so sorry, Clark, but I'm actually engaged to Brian, Sasha's son. I only took this job because I wanted to find a chance to ruin her business and life. As soon as I saw Sasha was interested in you, I decided to try and get you to like me, so that I can let her know what it's like when she loses someone she loves. Then, by using you, I'd take all the confidential info to... Ugh, I'm so sorry, Clark. By the time I'd finished telling him, I was crying so much I could barely breathe, and I knew Clark would be deeply upset. But instead, something crazy happened. He came over and hugged me. He told me to calm down, and then he said, "Revenge is pointless, Ellie. It doesn't do anyone any good, especially not you. I know Sasha hurt you, but you need to let that go. It's in the past now. Sure, it might make you feel good right now, but in the long run, will you be any happier?" I just cried even more then. Why was he still being so nice to me? I didn't deserve this. I kept apologizing, and he said he understood why I'd done it all, and that he forgave me. He said, "I know you have a good heart in there. You just got a little lost, that's all. But promise me one thing, please don't hand over the documents to your old company. Our company has worked so hard on this. Please don't do it, Ellie." Well, it was the least I could do after everything I'd done to him so far. I promised not to hand the documents over, and after I left Clark in the office, I realized something. I actually liked him. Not just as a friend or colleague, but as something more. I had actual feelings for him, and now I'd gone and hurt him so much I felt awful. And there were still a couple of other things I had to deal with too. As soon as I got home, I called Brian, but he didn't answer. I knew I couldn't wait any longer, so I left him a voice message explaining everything. I ended the message by saying sorry, but I knew Brian would struggle to forgive me, and I didn't blame him. Not only had I cheated on him, I'd even tried to harm his mom. Anyway, she was his mom, even if she'd done bad stuff in her past. The next morning, I quit my job. People were shocked, but I just told them I wanted to go home and be with my mom. When I was packing my stuff at my office, I found a note paper from Clark saying, "Leave the grief behind and live happily, my darling. A good girl like you deserves happiness." So Clark wasn't angry with me at all. That's enough. Now I could leave without any worries. Over the next few days, I packed up all my stuff and left San Fran. My heart was aching the whole time, but I knew I needed to get out of there and clear my head. I just checked in at the airport when Brian called me. I was so nervous to answer his call, as I hadn't heard back from him since I left the voice message. I held my breath as I accepted the call and prepared for him to shout at me, but it didn't happen. Still, with his usual sweetness and calm, he told me he was so shocked by my message he hadn't known what to say to me. It had taken him a few days to think everything through, and now he said he was ready to talk. "I'm not mad at you, Ellie," he said, "but you should have shared your childhood stuff with me earlier. And why didn't you tell me that it was my mom your dad ran off with? We could have worked through this. I'm so sorry my mom was the one that tore your family apart. But she's different now. Please just give her a chance. Brian, I'm sorry for everything. I'm glad that you're not angry with me, but to forgive your mom, I think I need more time." It seemed that Brian was about to say something, but that's when I heard the airport announcement asking passengers in my flight to proceed to the boarding gate. Therefore, I had no choice but to hang up the phone. Brian, listen. I'm so sorry, but my plane is ready for boarding. Can I call you back soon? Huh? Where are you going? He asked. I told him I was going to stay with my mom for a bit. Well, I reckon that it'll be better for you now. Take your time and think things through, especially our relationship. I was startled as he said our relationship, but realized he was right. I definitely needed some time to work things out. Could I ever forgive Sasha? I loved Brian, but was that love big enough to leave all this behind? I mean, I didn't know whether I could see Sasha as my mother-in-law or not, and how would my mom react to this? I got on the plane and sat down. For the first time in months, my heart felt more peaceful again, and I felt like I could really sleep. It's right. Neither Brian nor Clark hated me. Things would be okay. I was just about to close my eyes when I heard someone say my name. I looked up, and to my complete shock, Clark was walking down the aisle of the plane. He sat in the seat right opposite me and turned to me with the biggest grin and said, "I've never been to LA before. Want to be my tour guide?" Oh my God, I couldn't believe this. What was he doing here? I was so shocked to see him, but at the same time, there was no denying the excitement I felt. No one could ever say I led a boring life, that's for sure. I gave Clark a smile and said, "Sure," to him. I have no idea what the future holds for me, but I guess I'll find out soon. Wish me.
Can you imagine what it's like to be so pretty that people actually bully you because of it? Most of you are probably thinking that being pretty is an amazing thing, but just wait until you hear my story. I'm Jasmine, and I'm 16 years old. And yep, I am indeed named after Princess Jasmine, because the moment I was born, my dad said I looked exactly like her. So growing up, I was naturally very pretty, and the older I got, the more the boys chased me. But I was oblivious to this. Just because I was pretty didn't mean I was arrogant about it. In fact, I was a very caring kid. I always liked to help people in my class and really didn't care about the way people looked. I wanted to help everyone. One time in 3rd grade, there were 3 boys fighting, and I went to help them. But to my complete shock, they were fighting over me. Our teacher eventually broke up the fight and had to split them all up and make them sit on the opposite side of the classroom, away from me. I was so shocked. Why would people fight over me? Well, by the time I was in 5th grade, I'd gotten even prettier, and at one point, there were 5 guys fighting over me. One day, 2 of those guys, Jack and Tyler, were both running towards me from opposite sides of the playground. I was just standing there watching them come towards me, and I panicked and quickly jumped out of the way. They both ended up bashing into each other and fell over. Honestly, it was so funny. I helped them up, but inside, I was dying of laughter. Most girls would probably love getting attention like that, but it drove me crazy. I just wanted people to like me for who I was, not because I was pretty. Even though I got tons of attention from boys, the girls didn't like me. There was one girl called Mia who hated me so much, she actually bullied me. She would always go out of her way to do horrible things to me. Like this one time where she jumped on me in gym class and broke my right arm. She pretended it was an accident, but I know she deliberately did it. And obviously, I use my right arm for everything, so it was torture. I cried so much because for months I couldn't write anything, and writing was my most favorite thing in the world. And that wasn't the only horrible encounter with Mia. One time I was at the park with my big brother, and he left me alone on the swings so he could go hang out with his friends. As soon as he was out of sight, I saw Mia heading towards me. She looked angry, and I quickly closed my eyes because I was so scared. I thought she was going to hit me. But suddenly, I heard someone running, and I opened my eyes just in time to see my brother grab her arm to stop her from hitting me. He was protecting me, but then he took it too far. He hit her in the face so hard, he knocked her front tooth out. She was screaming and crying, and my brother just grabbed me and made me run out of the park with him. After that, Mia didn't bother me anymore. I moved up to middle school and never saw her again, but my life didn't get much better. You see, at my new school, the uniforms were so ugly. I went from being the pretty girl to a complete tomboy. We had to wear these red polo shirts with baggy nude pants. Honestly, it was not a good look for me. Sure, I was glad not to be the girl guys were fighting over anymore, but I didn't like feeling ugly in the uniform. Then, when we had the school dance, we were finally allowed to wear whatever we wanted. I decided to wear my favorite little black dress that showed off my curvy body. As soon as I walked through the doors into the dance, all eyes were on me. I couldn't believe how much of a difference my outfit could make. All the guys kept trying to get my attention, but I just wanted to dance. It was such a fun night, but the next day was crazy. I got to class and we had to hand in our essays. I went to give mine to the teacher, and when I was walking back to my seat, a girl called Paloa stopped me and said, "Jasmine, everyone knows your melons are fake. You had plastic surgery, didn't you?" She said it so loud, and everyone started laughing, even my friends. I was so embarrassed and just ran out of there crying. Why would she say something like that? To make matters even worse, when I eventually came back to my desk, I noticed someone had messed with my artwork. I love drawing, especially Dragon Ball characters, and I'd drawn a Goku that morning. Someone had ruined it by drawing fake boobs, and then underneath they'd written, "You are so fake." I honestly wanted to run out of there and never go back. People were being so mean. Suddenly, a guy called Peter, who was always quite horrible to me, grabbed the drawing and ripped it up. I didn't understand how people could treat me like this. The rest of my middle school life was pretty much the same. I felt miserable, and I thought finally high school would be better. But on my first day, I was sitting alone and I heard a group of girls whispering about me. They were all really pretty and popular, and I tried to ignore them, but two of them came over to me and sat on either side of me. I felt terrified, but suddenly one of them said, "Oh my God, you're so pretty. How come you're eating all alone? You can come sit at our table because you're pretty enough." After my middle school experience, I was so happy that people were being nice to me again. Soon I started hanging out with the pretty girls all the time, and the leader of the group, Ashley, she asked me if I had a boyfriend, and when I told her I didn't, she laughed and said, "Don't you worry, we'll find you one." But I didn't want them to find me one, because the more I hung out with them, the more I realized that the guys they liked were total troublemakers, and I wasn't interested in those type of guys at all. After a few weeks of hanging out with them, I realized they were too much. I didn't want to spend my days gossiping and being surrounded by drama. Just because I was a pretty girl didn't mean I had to hang out with the pretty girls. I heard there was a new kid at school, and the girls were all making fun of him for some reason. I didn't like what they were saying about him. And so the next day, I decided to go introduce myself and see if he was okay. Well, I have no idea why people were making fun of him. He was gorgeous. Drop dead gorgeous. But he was so shy, and so I just sat on a table near him and stared at him nonstop. I eventually plucked up the courage to go and introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Jasmine," I said. "Nice to meet you." Then he said, "I'm Chris. Hi." And after that, we got chatting, and I couldn't believe how much we had in common. I could see everyone staring at us chatting, but I didn't care. Chris said he'd worried that no one would want to be his friend, and I told him that I would be. After that, we started hanging out every day, and I quickly fell for him. He was kinda nerdy, but I liked that about him. One day, before Valentine's, he asked me what my favorite candy was. Then on Valentine's Day, he surprised me with flowers, a box of chocolates, and a teddy bear. Then a few days after, he gave me another surprise. He'd ordered all my favorite candy, Skittles, Sour Patch Kids, and Airheads. I was so happy. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. And he wasn't interested in me just because I was pretty. He actually cared about me. We started dating soon after that, and then I had my first kiss. It was kind of funny because I'd never kissed anyone before, so I had no idea what I was doing, but it felt nice. And after a while, I really got the hang of it, and now we're so in love. It's been 7 months since we started dating, and I never could have imagined my life could be so good now. We're even planning to get married in the future. I know we're still young, but when you know, you know.
Have any of you ever worn braces before? If you have, I feel for you. I really hope your experience was better than mine. I thought braces would make my life so much better, but oh boy, was I wrong. It all started because of how ugly my teeth were. They were short and had such big gaps between them. My friends sometimes made jokes about them, and it really hurt my feelings, but I tried to hide how I felt and laugh along with them. Because my parents worked away all the time, I lived with my grandparents in New Jersey, and they never thought there was any problem with my teeth. They said they'd grow as I got older, but honestly, I couldn't handle the teasing anymore. Eventually, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Every time my parents sent me pocket money, I'd save every cent. By my senior year of middle school, I'd finally saved up enough money, and so I went to the dentist and asked him for braces. My dentist said I need to wear them for about 2 years, and I thought that wouldn't be such a big deal, right? I mean, a few of my friends had braces too, and they still looked pretty, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me. My teeth were so messed up that normal braces just wouldn't cut it. My one friend had recently got these invisible braces, so I asked my dentist if I could get the same ones, but he said I needed something more hardcore. I ended up with black iron braces, and they made me look even uglier than before. How stupid I'd been to think that braces would magically make my teeth better. My friends thought it was hilarious and said I looked like I had train tracks inside my mouth. Everyone was laughing at me, and slowly I started to distance myself from them. Those days were some of the worst of my life, and all I wanted was to run away where no one would know me. So after I graduated from middle school, I persuaded my parents to let me go live with them in New York. I figured that I could start again with a clean slate at my new school. But seeing as I still had 2 years to go with the braces, I needed to make a plan. I didn't want to be the kid everyone laughed at anymore, so I decided to fake being mute so that I could hide my braces. On the first day at my new school, I'd prepared a letter that said I was mute due to oral surgery affecting my larynx, and that I was in the recovery phase, but it could take years to heal. I even faked my parents' signatures. Luckily for me, they were too busy to take me to school on my first day, so everything was going to plan. I thought someone might be at least a little suspicious, but no one asked me about it. And even the teachers gave me sympathy and said everything would be okay, and I'd still do well in my classes. I couldn't believe it. I knew I had to be careful though. So I separated myself from the other kids so they wouldn't try and talk to me. I didn't even eat lunch in the cafeteria because I was too afraid people would see how embarrassing I looked when I ate. I seriously had to open my mouth wide and chew super carefully, and afterwards there was always chunks of food stuck in my braces. But ugly teeth aside, I actually wasn't bad looking. In fact, thanks to the braces, I'd lost 10 kilograms. So my body was looking quite good. If I didn't open my mouth, I was kind of pretty. And because I kept myself separate from everyone, there was an air of mystery about me. After a week or so, a few guys started approaching me, trying to flirt with me, but I just ignored them. I knew if I opened my mouth, it would be game over. I could see they thought I was a bit of a diva, but it was better than revealing my ugly secret. There was one guy called Jake that I secretly liked though, and I knew he liked me too, as he always tried to speak to me. But of course, I ignored him, and it made me feel so bad. Anytime he came up to me, I'd pretend to be busy or act like he was invisible. I wish I could just be honest with him, but then he wouldn't be into me. I mean, what guy wanted to date a girl with braces like mine? And as for the girls, they didn't like me one bit. One time, a girl in my class called Angela tried to ask me a question, and I just walked away from her. She shouted after me, asking me why I was being so rude, and said that no one had ever ignored her before. She was the most popular girl at school, and ever since that day, she started to treat me so badly. I heard her whispering to her friends that I should be at a school for disabled kids, and then one day she even came and told me that to my face. I was so upset. This school was just as bad as my old one. I didn't understand how people could be so mean. But that was nothing. It was about to get worse. One day, I woke up with a cold. I couldn't stop coughing and sneezing, but there was no way I could miss school as we had an exam that day. I decided to wear a face mask so no one would see my braces if I had to cough or sneeze. When I finished the exam, I was at my locker and suddenly the biggest sneeze came. I ended up sneezing 5 times in a row, and afterwards I said, "Jesus!" out loud as a reflex. Then I panicked. I was supposed to be mute and I'd just spoken. What if someone heard me? Well, someone did. I turned around and Angela was standing there with her friends. They were looking at me in shock, and Angela said, "I thought you couldn't speak, Then she walked towards me and reached out to pull my mask off. Suddenly, Jake appeared and stopped her. He told her to back off, and then he stood there protecting me. No one had done something so nice for me in years. That's when Jake and I started hanging out. We would go to the library, for walks in the forest, and even play piano together. I used a small notebook to write down whatever I wanted to say to him. And of course, I just smiled, never laughed when I was with him. But then one day he leaned in to kiss me, and the worst thing ever happened. The thought of his lips touching the metal braces in my mouth made me disgusted with myself. So when his lips touched mine, I got such a fright I basically headbutted him. And when I realized what a stupid thing I was doing, blood was pouring out of his nose. Both of us frantically tried to stop the bleeding. I felt so ashamed of what I'd done that I had to try so hard not to cry in front of him, and he also blushed shyly. After that, it was hard to fully relax with him. Even though I liked him so much, I was so afraid that he'd catch a glimpse of my monster teeth and then break up with me. Little did I know what was just around the corner. One morning I was walking to my locker when I realized everyone was staring at me. I felt so self-conscious and didn't understand why they were all looking at me. And then I saw it. Plastered across my locker were tons of photos of me, and they were all of me from middle school, from when I hadn't worn braces to when I had it full of my mouth. They were the worst photos ever. I was ugly and fat in them, and I couldn't believe someone could be so cruel. As I stood there in shock, Angela walked up to me and said, "You're a liar, a monster pretending to be a mute little princess. Well, the truth is out now." Then she turned to everyone watching us and told them I really could speak. Turns out her cousin was in my old middle school. They'd been hanging out, and she told Angela that I wasn't mute and hadn't had any surgery and that I just had ugly teeth. When she triumphantly walked past me, my anger flared up, and for a moment I lost control. I rushed in and pushed her down the hallway. Then I jumped in to sit on her back and started pulling her hair. And then I saw blood, and that's the moment when I realized I'd taken it too far. Her front teeth had broken when she'd fallen. Everyone was taking photos. I was sitting on Angela's back, holding her hair, and my mouth was wide open, revealing hideous braces. Jake was also present in the crowd and looked at me in awe. I don't know if it was me or Angela who was more humiliating in this situation. After that, Angela had to wear big black iron braces just like me. The dentist said there were problems with her root canal, so she couldn't have implants. The only solution was wearing braces and hoping that her other teeth would move and fill the gaps. And my parents had to come to the school and apologize. And of course, I was suspended for what I did, not just for pushing Angela, but also the fact I forged my parents' signature. Jake never spoke to me again, which broke my heart. But what hurt even more was what happened a few weeks later. I found out Jake and Angela started dating. I couldn't believe it. I knew Angela was only doing it to get back at me, but it made me wonder, did that mean Jake didn't find girls with braces ugly? Why did I hide mine then? And there's one thing I still want to know. How do they kiss when Angela has a mouthful of braces?
Hey guys, it's me again, Ellie. So in the first part of my story, I told you about how my dad abandoned me and my mom when I was just a kid to go live with his mistress, and that made me never want to date guys. But then I met Brian, and we got engaged! Meeting his mom was a huge shock because she was none other than my dad's mistress from all those years ago. I couldn't handle it and decided to get revenge. First, I started working in her company, and then I noticed she had a crush on Clark, the head of the software design department, so I decided to steal him from her, and you won't believe what happened next. One Friday evening, after everyone had left, I noticed that Clark was still working. I made him a cup of coffee and asked about how the proposal he was working on was going. We had a pretty nice chat, and I tried to flirt with him. I won't lie, I started to see why Sasha fancied him. He was a really nice guy. I even gave him my number and said if he ever needed any help with the proposal, just to call me. We didn't get to chat for long, though, because Brian suddenly called me and said he was waiting outside. When I got downstairs, he was dressed up in a nice shirt and said he wanted to take me to our favorite restaurant. I was pretty surprised because we hadn't gone on a spontaneous date in a while. We'd both been so busy recently. I ordered my favorite ramen soup, and then I smiled and asked Brian in a teasing way, "What's the occasion? You haven't taken me out on a date in ages." I waited for him to reply, and he wouldn't look at me. I started to panic and asked him, "Brian, what is it? Is something wrong?" Then he told me that he'd just been assigned to manage a big project in New York. He said he needed to fly there the following week and that the project was expected to last 3 months. But he said he'd come back every weekend to see me and that it was just temporary. I couldn't even respond. I just stared at him with the noodle hanging out of my mouth. My heart was doing somersaults. Brian started laughing and said, "Look at you, Ellie. Your mouth is open so wide you're basically drooling. Come on, I'll be back every weekend." Poor Brian, he didn't even know what I was thinking right now. This coincidence was such a perfect ingredient for my revenge recipe, because now I could carry out my revenge on his mom without him knowing. Brian had no idea what I was up to, and I felt kind of bad. He really loved me, and I didn't want to hurt him by doing this to his mom, but I had to. I had to get revenge. Nothing else mattered. Later that night, we were watching a movie together in bed, and as the movie ended, Brian said he was exhausted and wanted to go to sleep. But my phone beeped right at that moment. It was a text from Clark. I didn't want Brian to see, so I took my phone to the bathroom to reply to him, and it said, "Thanks for your support tonight. Due to that, I had came up with a possible solution for the proposal." For the rest of the night, while Brian slept sweetly next to me, Clark and I texted back and forth all night. So far, it looked like my plan was working. Then, the next week, Brian left for his business trip, and as expected, he was so busy he couldn't make it back every weekend to see me. I missed him so much, but I was also grateful because it gave me time to really get to know Clark. And during those 3 months, we became quite close. Of course, during that time, Sasha still consistently flirted with Clark. It was super awkward because he clearly wasn't interested. One weekend, we had a team bonding trip and went stand-up paddleboarding. Sasha pretended she couldn't do it and kept asking Clark to help her, but he pretty much ignored her and hung out with our other colleagues instead. And then she asked him to join her for lunch one day, but he said he was busy, and I just had to laugh, because actually he was having lunch with me. I had to be really careful that she didn't discover I was flirting with Clark, because then I could lose my job and my plan would have failed. Also, not to mention the fact that I was engaged to her son, and if any mom saw her daughter-in-law to be flirting with some other guy, she'd freak out. Honestly, it was nerve-wracking. I was constantly on edge, terrifying that she'd notice what I was up to. And there were a couple of times where she almost caught me. One night, both Clark and I worked late, and we left the office together and planned to go for a drink. But as soon as we got in Clark's car, I saw Sasha pulling into the car park. She spotted Clark and his car. She literally drove her car toward us. Her face was so cheerful that I knew she would walk toward Clark's car when she got out of her car. At that moment, I knew I had to get out of Clark's car ASAP before she noticed me. I excused Clark that I'd left my phone upstairs, and before Clark could have any responses, I got out of his car and ran as fast as I could. Just only when I safely hid behind a big pillar did I stop to breathe and realize that my heart almost exploded from fear. From that time, I was more careful with Sasha, but it was so hard. A day when I was making a move to Clark in his office, I sat close to him and gave him an affectionate look. And someone knocked on the door. I abruptly got off Clark because I thought that was Brian's mom again. I breathed a sigh of relief when realizing it was only Clark's secretary, yet my heart was still beating very rapidly. It was all worth it, though. After 2 months of flirting with him, he confessed to me that he liked me. When I read the text from him, I was so happy I actually squealed. I'd done it. Now for part 2 of my plan. I was going to use Clark to find out exactly how I could make Sasha's company collapse into a million little pieces. So, when Clark asked me to be his girlfriend, I agreed, but on one condition, that we kept it a secret. Clark agreed to this because he knew there would be lots of troubles if Sasha found out. And honestly, Clark treated me so nicely, even nicer than Brian did. He showered me in gifts, and he really listened to me. Anytime I told him I liked something, he remembered and would surprise me with it the next time I saw him. At work, we had to keep things on the down low, but every morning I'd find a handwritten love note in the drawer of my desk. It really made me feel guilty because it was clear Clark liked me a lot, and there I was, just using him for revenge. The company was about to release the new app they'd been working on for the past year, and it was expected to make the company gain a huge market share and beat all its competitors, including my old company. So I started doing overtime with Clark so that I could get access to the info on how the software for this app had been created. It was top secret info, and as a junior project manager, I had no right to this info. My old company would love to get their hands on this confidential info, and with it, they could easily kick Sasha's company to the curb and dominate the market. Then she'd have lost not just her crush, but also her career. Served her right for what she did to me and my family. One night, after we'd worked super late, he turned to me and said, "We should get going. I'm exhausted." He went to the toilet before we left and asked me to sort out the documents. As soon as he left the room, I took photos of the app development plan and all the different steps in creating the software. This was like gold, but Clark was too quick. He came back before I'd managed to take a pic of the last document. Damn. Now I just need to find another opportunity to get that last bit of info. But I had to act quickly because the app was about to be released and my old company was urging me to send the documents ASAP. That night, I felt so anxious that I couldn't sleep. What was I playing at? I mean, sure, I wanted to get revenge on Sasha. She deserved it. But this would crush Brian, who I really did love. And then what about Clark? He liked me so much and had no clue that I was just using him. He'd be devastated if he found out. How had I gone from being an independent single girl with no interest in guys to the kind of girl who two-timed? I couldn't stop thinking about it all, but I had to focus. The revenge plan needed to go ahead. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted, but luckily it was the weekend. I'd arranged to go over to Clark's place to try and get my hands on that last document, but unfortunately, Clark wasn't interested in talking about work. He said it was the weekend and he just wanted to relax with me. Then he suggested we rent bikes and cycle over the Golden Gate Bridge and have a picnic to watch the sunset. Wow, it ended up being the best day ever. I felt so happy and I hadn't realized how funny Clark could be. We laughed nonstop and I didn't want the day to end. We kissed under the sunset. How romantic it was. But little did I know what was waiting for me at home. When I was just a little girl, someone ruined my life. And to this day, I've never forgotten it. Never in a million years did I think I'd bump into them as an adult and have the opportunity to get revenge. But that's exactly what I did. Before I dive into my story, allow me to introduce myself a bit. I'm Ellie, and I'm 25 years old. I live in San Fran, and even though I've had a pretty tough life, I'm pretty happy now, and I have the greatest job. I'm a project manager at a cool startup in Silicon Valley. I work hard, not just because I enjoy my job, but because I like being an independent kind of girl. A lot of my friends ask me why I don't just find a rich guy to take care of me, and that just drives me crazy. I mean, I chose to be single because I really don't trust guys. You see, my dad is a nasty piece of work, and so he left a pretty bad taste in my mouth when it came to how I felt about men. When I was just 5 years old, he abandoned me and my mom in LA to go live with his mistress. Even talking about it now, I feel angry. We were devastated and begged him to stay, but he left us. After that, things were horrible for me and my mom. My dad was the breadwinner and was the CEO of a company, so we'd never had to worry about a thing. But after he left, my mom struggled to find a job, and sometimes we even went to bed hungry. I remember people felt sorry for us, and one of our neighbors started leaving food parcels on our doorstep. It was very sweet of them, but humiliating too. I hated my dad for leaving us in that mess, and I hated his mistress even more for stealing him away. I vowed to never date anyone because I never wanted to end up in my mom's position. All I knew was that men hurt women, and that wasn't going to be my story. So anytime guys asked me out, I turned them down. That was until something crazy happened that changed my mind on this whole guy thing. I was feeling really ill one day, and because I lived alone, I had to go out to the grocery store to get some food. When I got back, I felt like I was about to pass out. Before I even made it inside the door, I fainted on my porch. Luckily for me, one of my neighbors saw me fainting and rushed over to help me. I'd only ever seen him a few times in passing, but when I opened my eyes, he was standing over me. I felt so grateful. He told me his name was Brian, and I couldn't believe how kind he was being. He looked after me until I'd fully recovered. He made me soup and even sat by my bed and wiped my face with a cold cloth to help get rid of my fever. The more time he spent by my side, the more I started to think maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe not all men were bad news like my dad. Maybe Brian was one of the good ones. I'm not proud of this, but I might have pretended to still be sick, just so he would keep coming to see me. Even after a week, he laughed and said to me, "Ellie, your fever is totally gone. Are you just using me now?" I could feel my face go bright red and jokingly said, "Look at me, I definitely still got a fever." I really didn't want Brian to stop visiting. Other than my mom, no one had ever been so loving towards me. There was no hiding fact that I had feelings for him. We started hanging out more. Some days I worked super late, and whenever I came home, he'd invite me over for dinner. And one night, he had set up candles and romantic music, and guys, that's when we kissed for the first time. It felt so good, and I knew there was no point fooling myself. I loved him, and he loved me too. For the next few months, we were inseparable. We spent every possible moment together, and after 6 months of dating, he asked me to meet him for lunch one day down by the waterfront. When I arrived, I couldn't believe it. He'd arranged for us to go out on a boat for a picnic. Then, when we were out in the water, looking back at the city, he turned to me and said, "Ellie, I've never met anyone like you before. I want to spend the rest of my life looking after you, my Ellie bear. Will you marry me?" Oh my God, I'm not joking. I started crying so much, I thought we were going to capsize. This was the most romantic proposal ever. Of course I said yes. I couldn't wait to spend my life with Brian, and I was already so excited to start planning our wedding. I'd always dreamt of getting married in a vineyard near Sacramento. So now all we had to do was choose a venue and, of course, tell our parents. Brian had met my mom, and they got on so well, but I still hadn't met his parents. They were divorced, and Brian only really saw his dad. His mom was always working, he said, and so they didn't hang out much. I told him it was important to me that I met them both. So he arranged it. I was pretty nervous, but Brian's dad was so lovely, just like him. I could see where he got his kindness from. Then it was time to meet his mom. We went to a restaurant that she chose, and when we walked in, I thought I was going to collapse. This couldn't be happening, I thought. Brian's mom was none other than Sasha, my dad's mistress from all those years ago. I felt sick, and Brian could sense something was wrong. I tried to act as normal as possible, but inside, I wanted to scream. Brian introduced us and told me his mom was the CEO of my company's rival company. Could this get any worse? I had to smile and pretend to be happy to meet her. Honestly, I felt like I was going to puke and was counting the minutes until I could run out of there. Finally, his mom said she had to get back to work, and I felt like I could breathe again. But I had questions. On the way home, I asked Brian about his mom's life, and he said she divorced his dad 20 years ago when he was just 7 years old. She'd moved in with another guy, which I knew was my dad, but they'd broken up a long time ago, he said, and she had been constantly changing boyfriends till now. I turned to Brian and I said, "Are you okay with that? If she was my mom, I wouldn't want her to be playing around like that." But Brian just said, "I don't care. All that matters is that she's a good mom. As for her private life, she can do whatever she likes, right?" I couldn't believe it. How could Brian be such a good son? His mom had abandoned him, and he was just fine with it. I would never forgive my dad and his mistress for destroying me and my mom's life. And now I decided it was time for revenge. She'd made my childhood a living hell, and now it was her turn to know what it felt like. With planning the wedding, we started to see his mom, Sasha, more often, and I used these opportunities to try and get closer to her. Then one day I started complaining about my job, even though I loved it, and Sasha said, "Why don't you come work for me? There's a vacancy going, and you'd be perfect for it. I mean, you have so much experience." This was exactly what I wanted. Now I could ruin her company and then watch her life crumble. Everyone was surprised I was quitting my job to work for our rival company, but I didn't even have time to care about what they thought. On the first day at my new job, Sasha introduced me to everyone in the software design department, and that's when I met Clark, the head of the department. He was a little older than me, around 30, and he was well known in Silicon Valley for being super smart. The department was about to launch a new app that would blow people's minds, and everyone was super excited about it. Throughout my first day there, I couldn't help but notice how much attention Sasha was paying to Clark. It was kind of sickening to watch. She constantly flirted with him, and all I could think was how he was way too young for her. At lunch, she acted like a schoolgirl, saying, "Clarky, I saved a seat for you." I couldn't understand why Clark would like her. She continued to flirt with him over the next few weeks. She always brought him a coffee, and she didn't do that for anyone else. Then in meetings, she always chose his ideas. It was pretty frustrating, and I even thought about telling Brian that it looked like his mom had found a new boy toy. But then one day, I was working late, and when I walked past the meeting room to go to the restroom, I heard Sasha and Clark chatting, and I couldn't stop myself from eavesdropping. Sasha was giggling and said, "Oh, come on, Clark. I'll even give you a pay rise again. It's just one date." Then Clark said, "Sorry, I really can't. I'm too busy, and to be honest, I didn't have that kind of feeling for you. I'm so sorry." Ha! It made me so pleased to hear Clark rejecting her. She didn't deserve a nice guy like Clark. As I walked back to my desk, I glanced into the meeting room and I saw how upset she looked. Wow, she looked really hurt. She must have liked Clark a lot. And so, that's when my plan started to unfold. I would do to her what she'd done to my mom. I would steal the guy she loved right from under her nose. So, in the first part of my story, my parents set me up on some blind dates. First, there was Trent, who ended up being gay, so that didn't work out. And then I met Corey, who wasn't far from being called my worst enemy. We hated each other, but still, he made me go on dates with him. And then it turned out he was also gay, and that Trent was actually his ex. Corey begged me to help him get Trent back. So let's see how Trent will react to this. I decided to casually ask Trent about his past relationships and stuff, to see if he'd bring Corey up. He said he'd been so badly betrayed by his ex and that he still hadn't forgiven him for it. Clearly, he was talking about Corey. I didn't know what to do. It was killing me to see how miserable they both were. Seeing how Corey desperately wanted Trent back made me realize that he had changed. If he was given one more chance, he would never risk losing Trent a second time. So I decided to help them get back together. I told Corey about it first, and I have never seen him look so happy. And after that, we started getting on pretty well, because we didn't have to pretend to be dating anymore. We could just be ourselves. And guess what? He's not actually that bad. In fact, he was just like me, having to put up with his parents setting him up on stupid dates. He even told my parents that I was such an amazing girl. And after that, my parents started to respect me more. The only thing was, I couldn't let Trent know about my plan. In fact, Trent didn't even know that Corey and I knew each other. But from the way Trent spoke about Corey, I knew he still had feelings for him too. So all I had to do was set up a date for them and let fate handle the rest. I asked Trent to meet me for dinner and arranged with Corey to secretly show up later. But as soon as Trent saw Corey, his face went bright red, and within a second flat, he was furious. He stood up and started yelling at us both and even pushed Corey out of the way as he stormed out. Every single person in the restaurant was staring at us, and I even heard some old couple whispering that I was clearly two-timing these guys, and I'd just been caught, and how embarrassing that was. Trent was really mad at me after that, so I had to try and get him to forgive me, and at the same time, try and persuade him to give it another go with Corey. I knew that Trent had a sweet tooth, so I started making cupcakes and cookies and leaving them on his doorstep. He never answered the door no matter how many times I knocked, and one time I left a 3-tiered chocolate cake at his door, and I overheard his neighbors talking. One of them said, "Oh, when will she stop? What a desperate gold digger." And then the other looked at me and started shaking her head. She said, "She clearly has no dignity. What kind of girl chases a boy like that?" I was so embarrassed. I realized how needy I must have looked, so I ran back to my car, but before I got in, Trent came running after me. He had heard the neighbors too, and he'd realized how hard I'd been trying. He said to me, "Crystal, stop it already. You keep trying to fix things that were never your fault to begin with." Well, at least he'd spoken to me again. I told him I was sorry, and I just missed hanging out with him. So he said he forgave me, but there was one more thing he wanted. I replied to him with the biggest smile on my face. "Sure, anything for you, Trent. I'm all yours for today." "Okay then, let's go to the theme park. It's been a while, and I need something to relieve all this stress," he said. I'm pretty sure I started to sweat a little upon hearing that because I'm literally petrified of heights. So we went there and went on all the rides that Trent wanted to, and I had to close my eyes the whole time and spent most of the day clinging onto him out of fear. But Trent seemed to have a great time, and I was just glad to make him happy again. That was all that mattered. After that day, I was able to bring up Corey again, and I told him that he didn't have to take him back, but maybe he could just open his heart a little and give Corey a chance to explain himself. He reluctantly agreed, just so that I'd stop going on and on about it. And he did give him a chance. Well, not really a chance, but he did keep the gifts Corey sent instead of sending them right back. And he stopped blocking his number. They even started talking again. Anytime Trent replied to Corey, Corey would call me and tell me, and he'd be so excited. And they even met up to have a serious chat about what had happened. Now there's no more bad blood between them, and all that was left to do was for Corey to make a move to win Trent back. Corey started to shower Trent in love. He even bought him an annual pass to the theme park and backstage passes to his favorite singer. But still, Trent wouldn't budge. He was being nice to Corey, but he didn't seem to want to date him again, which was so weird. What was going on? Had Trent met another guy already? One day, I met up with Trent to talk over a drink. I jokingly asked him, "Hey, are you seeing another guy? What about Corey? I mean, I know he hurt you in the past, but he's changed now. And honestly, you two were miserable before. Now that he's back in your life, you seem so much happier." I waited for him to reply, but he just stared at me, which was really weird and it made me blush. Had I just stepped out of line? I said to him, "Well then, come on, spill the beans. Who is he?" Then he smirked and downed his drink, and he said, "The reason I'm so much happier is because, yes, I have met someone." "I knew it!" I interrupted. Then I realized he wasn't finished speaking. He continued, "But it's not a guy. It's a girl, and she's the reason why I can't be with Corey again. She made me realize that I'm actually bisexual, and I was surprised. I mean, I really loved Corey, so this girl kind of came out of nowhere and has blown me away with how incredible she is." I couldn't believe it. "Oh my God, who is she?" I said, laughing. And then he went bright red and said, "Crystal, come on, it's you. Duh." What? I was too shocked to even reply. My heart was beating so fast. Trent liked me? Honestly, I was so confused. I mean, Trent was gay. Why would he like me? I felt so awkward and I could feel his eyes on me. I knew he was waiting for me to say something. I looked up for a second and our eyes met, and the tension in the air was so intense. I just couldn't stand it. I made up an excuse, saying I felt tired and that I needed to go home. Trent looked a bit upset, but still offered to drive me home. I turned him down, though, and said I'd take an Uber. I just needed some alone time. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. It actually made sense. We had so much fun together, but because I'd known he was gay, I'd never really looked at him as boyfriend material. But what if he wasn't gay? I mean, could we be together? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I liked him too. But I had to forget about those feelings because what about Corey? I couldn't just steal the love of his life like that. He'd be heartbroken. I didn't sleep a wink that night. All kinds of questions constantly popped up in my head. The next day, Trent texted me first, asking, "Did you sleep well last night? I hope what I said last night didn't keep you up all night," with a smiley face. I replied, "Actually, I was awake the whole night. I've thought a lot about my feelings, but Trent, I don't want to hurt Corey. We can't do this." He then replied, "Don't think too much. That doesn't matter. Just answer this one question. Do you have feelings for me? Just say yes or no." I don't know what was going through my mind, but at that moment, I guess I was just tired of things being so complicated. So I typed yes, then hit send. Okay, so now Trent knew I had feelings for him too, and he sounded so happy. He said I shouldn't worry and that we could work this out as long as our feelings were mutual. A few days later, Trent said he'd meet up with Corey to talk to him. I was way too anxious to ask Trent how it went, but then at midnight, Corey called me. I was terrified to answer. I knew he would yell at me, but to my complete surprise, he didn't. He sounded calm and said Trent had told him everything and that if I truly had feelings for him, I should go for it. He said, "I've spent years away from the one I love, and I don't want the same thing to happen to you and Trent. It's too painful. You both deserve to be happy. Plus, you helped me so much. Thanks to you, I managed to clear things up with Trent, and just having him back in my life, even as a friend, is good enough for me. I'll find someone else, and it'll make me so happy to know you two are happy." I was so touched by what he said, I couldn't even respond. I just started crying and told him he'd definitely meet someone amazing soon. Even he sounded choked up, but he tried to hide it by laughing and calling me a crybaby. Now that I had his support, I decided to give it a go with Trent. We went on a date and it was so fun. Seeing as it wasn't our first time hanging out, we were so comfortable around each other. And now that I knew he was interested in me, I noticed how much he gave me butterflies. It was amazing. Now we're officially a couple. Turns out my parents are pretty good at playing Cupid, right? Hi, my name's Crystal, and my family are super wealthy. I have never needed to work, but I wanted to. So me and my friend Alice decided to become entrepreneurs, and my dad helped fund our startup. We both love shopping, so we created a really cool app that helps you choose the latest trends to suit your body. And unlike my friends, I was single, but I didn't mind. In fact, I loved how free I felt. However, there was just one small problem. My parents weren't okay with this. They were desperate for me to find someone and get married, and that's when they decided to take matters into their own hands. They started setting me up on blind dates. I told them I could easily find my own date, but they said that whoever I dated had to come from a good, wealthy family. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even interested in dating, especially as I'd had some really bad relationships in college. That's also why my parents wanted to find someone for me, as they'd hated the guys I'd dated before and didn't trust me that I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. I refused to go, but then my dad said something that sent chills up my spine. Okay, don't go, but then your startup is over. I'll take away all your funding. Wait, no, that couldn't happen. We'd worked so hard to build the app, and the only way we could afford it was with my dad's help. Fine, I'll go, but I can't promise I'll like these guys, I said. I went on the date, and then many more after that, and I quickly became an expert at making sure those boys wouldn't be interested in me. And yet still, I was keeping my parents happy by going on the dates. It was a win-win. But before I became a pro at this blind date game, there were many awkward and hilarious situations that I had to go through. On one of my first dates, we met up in the lounge of a hotel. All I knew was that the guy Trent owned the hotel and that his family were a big name in some hotel chains in the area. I was running late, and the parking lot in the basement was jam-packed. I finally managed to find an empty spot, and I was rushing to get to it. But then out of nowhere, another car also appeared and was heading for the same spot. We ended up bumping into each other. Both our cars got badly scratched, and mine even had a dent. Oh no, my baby. I was so upset. This was my Porsche that my parents had bought me for my sweet 16th. And even though I have a ton of other cars at home, this was my most favorite. Who would dare to hurt my child like this? I stomped out of the car and started yelling at the guy. He climbed out of his car and he was wearing a hat, so I couldn't really see his face, but I guessed he was younger than me. Could he be the valet parking boy or something? But then he started speaking and said that it was my fault because I'd been going in the wrong direction, and that he had every right to make me pay for the damage done to his car. What? He's the one who should have been paying for the damage on my car. Well, that just made me even more furious. And then he had the cheek to say he was in a rush, and he handed me his business card and said we'd settle this later. I snatched that card out of his hand and threw it in my bag without even looking. That would be my lawyer's problem, not mine. And to make matters worse, he had taken the parking spot. So now I still had to find somewhere else to park. It took me ages. And by then, I figured my date wouldn't have even waited for me. I arrived at the table that had been reserved for us, and of course he was already sitting there. From afar, I was impressed. He looked like a total babe. Maybe my parents' taste wasn't so bad after all. And his outfit was on point. In fact, I'd seen it somewhere before. Must have been a new trend. I said hi to him and sat down, but he just started laughing. And after like 1 minute of smiling at me, he said hi back. Then he started to introduce himself, and I realized who he was. He was the guy I just bumped into in the parking lot. Oh my God, this couldn't be happening. This was too awkward. I pretended to look for something in my bag and then quickly glanced at his name card. Yep, it said general manager on it. Oh man, I was doomed. I tried my best to act like nothing had happened. I mean, maybe he didn't recognize me. Ugh, who am I kidding? Of course he did. And as the date went on, he kept teasing me about it, saying that the parking spot was reserved for hotel staff. I was kind of bummed. I mean, he was so cute, and I'd completely ruined my chances. I felt bad for creating such a bad impression and begged him not to tell my parents. He agreed that it would be our little secret, and after that things were better. We actually got really close and even became good friends. You're probably wondering why we didn't hit it off. Well, turns out he's actually gay. He trusted me enough to come out to me. That's how close we were. He hadn't even told his parents yet. And that's why these blind dates are as much of a nuisance for him as they are for me. So, he's the one who helped me come up with the idea to act like a bad girl, to turn off the other guys on dates. All based on his actual experience of our date. Ever since then, whenever I went on a blind date, I was intentionally late so that I'd make the worst impression possible. I'd wear my bad girl outfit, which was an oversized black shirt, ripped jeans, and dirty sneakers. And of course, I'd always chew gum. Make sure to have this annoyed look on my face all the time. This drove rich guys crazy, and none of them ever asked for a second date with me. But one time, it didn't go to plan. The guy I was on a date with, Corey, he saw right through me and even had the guts to confront me about what I was trying to do. It made me so mad, and it was the worst date ever. But still, he told his parents that it went well, and he wanted to see me again. He surely wanted to pick a fight with me. Since he was the only guy that I'd been on a blind date with that had given positive feedback, my parents were super stoked upon hearing this, and they made me continue seeing him. Otherwise, they said they'd take away my cars and cancel my credit cards. I couldn't stand him. He was your typical bad boy player type who thought he owned the world. He didn't even work. His dad just made up a position for him in the family business. What a spoiled brat. And we didn't even actually date. He just rang me up anytime he wanted and made me go to places with him, as if I was just an accessory to him. It's such a waste of time, but what else could I do? One day, we were at the country club to celebrate his dad's 60th. It was so boring, so I snuck outside for a bit. He caught me playing on my phone, and he literally snatched it out of my hand and teased me with it. He thought it was hilarious until he realized that I'd been texting with Trent. Suddenly, he looked really distant. Then he asked if I was close to this guy. I didn't even have a chance to respond. He quickly returned my phone and just left me standing there. I didn't get it. Was he jealous or something? After that, he disappeared for a few weeks, which was really odd because normally he was all up in my face all the time. My parents were worried, and they forced me to go check to see if he was okay. Why is he so bothersome? I didn't want to go at all, but still, I had to. I got to his apartment, and the whole place smelled like alcohol. I mumbled in annoyance, "Hey, are you an alcoholic or something? I thought you'd maybe been sick, but okay then. I see." Then he said, "This is all because of you." I was confused. What had I done? I was about to leave when I noticed something. It was a crumpled photo of Trent and Corey. Oh my God. Am I seeing things or what? I picked it up. Corey glanced over and sighed. After a really awkward silence, Corey told me that Trent was his ex. What? So Corey was gay too? They broke up because they had planned to run away together because neither of them were brave enough to come out to their parents. But then Corey had bailed on the plan when his dad had offered him a position in the company and a huge inheritance. He couldn't give that up. Trent had been so hurt because Corey had chosen money over their relationship. It's been 2 years since then, and Corey regrets it a lot, but Trent won't even give him the time of day anymore. That's when Corey asked me to help him speak to Trent again. Oh God, I don't know if I should do it because I don't want Trent to date such a bad guy again. Plus, maybe Trent will just think I'm taking Corey's side and cut me out of his life too. But what if Corey really has changed?
Hey guys, it's me, Milo. I'm back again to share the next part of my story with you. Firstly, here's a quick recap. So my ex Deanna cheated on me with some college doofus, and in doing so broke my heart. So I decided that if I couldn't be happy, then neither could anyone else. So, around Valentine's Day, I messed with other couples. One such prank led me to meet Vanessa. Then, I found myself falling for her. The problem is she has a boyfriend, and he's a jerk. And the even bigger problem is that I just found out that she's my ex's little sister. And there's a chance I may have told Vanessa some pretty harsh truths about her sister. But in my defense back then, I didn't realize they were siblings. At first, I had no idea how to deal with the situation, so I just decided to avoid everyone. If I saw Vanessa at school, then I darted around the corner into the restroom behind an overweight kid. Anything that meant I didn't have to face her. The problem was I found myself missing her too much. I felt like I couldn't live without her. So no matter the consequences, I had to do something now. So I walked up to her at lunch and told her I'd been avoiding her because I couldn't cope with seeing her so upset over her boyfriend. That didn't deserve her and it was wrong of him to hit her, and she should get out now while she still could. Then I told her I'd always be there for her, and hopefully as more than just friends. She seemed touched. She knew there were a lot of problems in their relationship too, but admitted she'd been in denial about it all. She held my hand and said that she had feelings for me too, but now we had to deal with her boyfriend first. Ugh, her boyfriend Kane. He was the short-tempered kind of guy who solves everything with a punch. He will never accept it if she breaks up with him. It would dent his pride too much, and probably result in him being violent toward her. While to be honest, I'm too much of a coward. I couldn't protect her in that case. If he knew she was breaking up with him to be with me, well, then that's the end for me. So I thought long and hard about this, and then, voila, I derived a master plan. If he couldn't handle Vanessa breaking up with him, then we'll make him break up with her. Wow, am I a genius or what? The next day I told Vanessa the plan. It's simple. She just needs to intentionally look sloppy, stinky, and ugly in front of him so he would soon tire of her. When she first heard it, she wasn't impressed and said, "That's so embarrassing. I can't do that. No girl wants to look like a mess." I told her that she would only have to do it in front of him. Besides, he went to a different school to us, so she could still look like her usual pretty self in class. Eventually, she agreed to do it. And as I expected, just after a few weeks of playing ugly, Kane had enough and broke up with her. Vanessa came around to mine and excitedly told me the news. She'd gone to Kane's place without any makeup on, wearing some stained oversized shirt, her hair a mess, and she hadn't even brushed her teeth. Then, when he ended it with her, she pretended to cry. I couldn't believe this good girl could act pretty well too. Then, seizing the occasion, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she of course said yes. Then we kissed, and well, talk about amazing. She was such a better kisser than her sister. We kept our relationship low-key at first. This worked for her. She didn't want to rub our relationship in Kane's face. And it worked for me as I didn't want Deanna to find out. Then, after a month of dating, she dropped the bomb. "I want you to meet my sister. She's in college and lives in another city, but she's currently home for vacation. I should officially introduce you to her first, since we don't know when she will leave again." I could have screamed out, but instead, I kept my cool and asked to see a picture of her. Then on seeing one, I feigned being shocked and said that this girl always picked on me during middle school, and I was still traumatized from it. That those were the darkest years of my life. I mean, I didn't actually know Deanna back in middle school, probably because she was a year older than me, but Vanessa didn't need to know this. Vanessa felt bad for me and said she didn't know that there was that side to her sister. She said it was true that Deanna was pretty cranky in middle school, but thought that was just puberty. She never realized she was actually a mean girl, especially not to a younger kid. By this point, I might as well have been cast in some soap opera as my performance was a class act. I must have looked so pathetic that she told me it's okay, and she'd not mention Deanna anymore until I felt comfortable about it. This solved my ex problem, for now, but it didn't solve the Kane problem, as he found out about Vanessa and me. And he wasn't happy. My guess is Kane must have stalked Vanessa and spotted us together. Then he followed me home, as that crazy dude showed up on my doorstep and yelled at me to stay away from her. Well, I couldn't blame him. No one on earth ever likes their ex's new partner. Not only did this crazy guy know where I lived, but now my sister Kayla also knew about my relationship with Vanessa. Since she's still bitter about the Valentine prank I pulled on her, recap, it involved her, her boyfriend, and a whole lot of duct tape. So it wasn't overly surprising when she smirked at me and said, Just you wait and see. I haven't forgot about what you did to me on Valentine's, and now seems like the perfect time for revenge. I repeated her words in a mocking tone to annoy her, but to be honest, deep down in my gut, I did feel on the anxious side. She's just as crazy of a prankster as I am. Now, I always had to be on guard. After that, my sister and Kane seemed to take turns to ruin our dates. Geez, didn't they have anything better to do? One time I was kissing Vanessa out in the yard. Suddenly there was water pouring down from nowhere. We were completely soaked. I looked around and saw my sister standing on the second floor balcony, holding an empty bucket, and said, "Oops, I was just trying to water the flowers." Then on a movie date night, Kane showed up at the same film, sat in the row behind us, and kept on kicking the back of my seat, and even threw popcorn at me. Later, when I went home and checked the hood of my hoodie, there were all kinds of trash and enough popcorn for the next movie date. How childish. It was all trivial stuff, really, but it was getting annoying. Then, on our 2-month anniversary, I told Vanessa to dress up all nice, then I took her to this swanky Italian restaurant. The meal was amazing, until when I reached into my pocket and took out my wallet to pay. Then, to my horror, a picture of a bikini-wearing girl fell out of nowhere. I was so shocked and just froze in confusion. Vanessa looked so upset. I explained that I'd never seen that picture before in my life, and I had no idea who the girl was. Then the waiter showed up with the card machine. I clumsily opened my wallet, but none of my cards were there. I searched my pockets again in panic, but nothing, not even a penny. Bright red, I muttered out that I had no money on me. This was the worst moment of my life. I thought I was going to lose my girlfriend and have to pot wash. But then I heard arguing coming from outside. Me, Vanessa, and the waiter all stared out the window and saw my sister and Kane yelling at each other. We stepped outside and listened in on their conversation. Turns out my sister had taken all the cards out of my wallet so I wouldn't be able to pay. She's been peeking in from the window all night long and spying on us, just to wait and see my pathetic face as I found out that all of my cards have vanished into thin air. But then she was disappointed that it didn't go to plan, because I was busy explaining to Vanessa about some stupid photo instead. That's when she met eyes with some crazy guy who was standing next to her and laughing his ass off in satisfaction, which you can already tell who he was, the mastermind of that bikini photo prank. Kayla got annoyed and picked a fight with Kane because now she felt like her prank had been overlooked and she wasn't happy about it. It's kind of dumb, really. As if they weren't so proud and headstrong, they could have watched me miserably try to squirm my way out of the no cards and picture of another girl fiasco. Instead, they'd been caught red-handed setting me up. Vanessa pointed at Kane and said to the waiter, "He'll pay for our meal." Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me away. So yeah, we left my sister and Kane to their arguing, and I took Vanessa home. Then, a few days later, Kane sent me a message. "It's amazing what delving into your past can bring up. I know all about you and Deanna. Set me up on a date with your sister or else I'll tell Vanessa everything." Dang it. Who would have thought after that stupid incident that crazy Kane guy would catch feelings for my evil little sister? In hot sweats, I replied that my sister already had a boyfriend. Unsurprisingly, Kane didn't care about this factor. He told me a time and a place and said my sister better be there else he wouldn't just tell Vanessa about Deanna. He'd also 100% ruin my life. OMG, what am I supposed to do now? Do I really have to set up a date for my little sister with a crazy guy like Kane? Oh well, she's not really sane either, but she's still my sister. But if I don't agree to help him, then who knows what could happen to me tomorrow? I mean, I don't want Vanessa to find out about Deanna, and I also don't want to end up a beaten up mess. I'm so torn. This is killing me.